Okay. So, personal gain in the quote. Selfishness. There is more selfishness and less principle among members of Congress than I had any conception of before I became President of the U.S. James Polk. So, do you like this quote? You think it's accurate? What do you think, Valdez?
It's a common sense quote.
Okay, common sense quote. Has anybody ever...
Can you explain that?
Well, has anybody ever worked in Congress? Or has anyone been an intern? No? Did I tell you the story about me working for Senator Murkowski? Senator Frank Murkowski? Do y'all you don't remember that? I was a high school intern for Frank Murkowski, and I had thought about going into politics at one time, and as I worked for him, it was an incredible eye-opener as he made a deal in the elevator as they were going down to vote on the floor. There was one senator, there was him, there was a senator, and then there was me in this elevator. And it's pretty intimidating to be in Congress and to work with the senators and the representatives. And it was definitely an eye-opener to watch him say to this other senator, he said, you know, I know you have a vote coming up. He's like, I will vote for this, but you have to vote for my bill that's coming up as well. So so the selfishness and the principle, you know, I didn't necessarily see that firsthand, but it definitely was something that it doesn't take much to see where it can easily go that direction, right? I'm not saying that example was the selfishness and the principle, but it definitely was blatant, and that's how they do business. That's just simply how they do business. So, so James Polk, you know, what do you think of him as a president? Okay, did anybody at Valdez get to read chapter 13? Okay. All right.
Just forgot.
What's that?
I must have just forgot.
All right.
I thought it was a 12.
Yeah. Well, last week was 12 while I was gone, and I see some of you watched the video of the recording of the lecture.
Was the video I clicked on was like an audio of like old folk music when I clicked on?
Yep. And there is that one too. There's that, and there's also the lecture online. And then there's an assignment to do.
Yeah, I did the assignment.
Okay.
I did all that.
Okay. And that is due Thursday at noon. Thank you.
I emailed you mine before class started.
Okay, perfect. All right. So if you have any questions, since I wasn't here last week, if you have any questions about chapter 12, now's the time to ask. Why did they make such a big deal about honor? Was honor a big deal in Europe?
Yeah. Honor is a big deal in all cultures.
Yes. Yes, you are correct, Emmanuel. Honor is a big deal in all cultures. And Historians were trying to determine why it was such a big deal in the South, right? And one of the things that they say is that because you have a stratified society, you want to make sure that you are not associated with the bottom stratification, okay? And in order to do that, many people put others down in order to make sure that they're not associated with that, all right? And you'll see honor also in the West. And one of the unique things about, and I'm talking like Wild Wild West, which is only a couple decades long, if that. But because you could remake yourself, that was something that people could use to really remake themselves, right? Do you need paper?
No.
Okay. So, if you remake yourself, honor is something that everyone respects. Everyone understands and respects, right? Trying to do the verb. Sorry, I don't know what the deal is today. I'll have to deal with that after class. Okay, so any other questions about chapter 12? No? Okay, so upper cotton, upper south, lower south.
Upper South is more diversified, right? Lower South is just mainly cotton.
Lower south was definitely all cotton, yes. I mean, cotton was king, right? I mean, just plain cotton was king. The upper south had a little bit more going on in diversification, but still they supplied the slaves for the cotton, right? Okay. It's important to understand the difference between the small slave owners, the yeomen, the people, the pine barons. Okay? Oh, and then look at that. De Tocqueville. Oh, they talk about de Tocqueville again. Huh. That's amazing, isn't it? And let's see. Violence, code of honor, lasted longer in the South, right? Slave family and the longevity, diet, and health of slaves. You've seen from the beginning how slavery and nutrition and how that affected the people of the South, especially the slaves. But the diet, by increasing the nutrition, increasing nutrition, the diet of the slaves changed the way that they, how the South developed, because with more slaves being born in North America, it changed the influx of slaves, it changed many things, and it changed the economy, especially in the upper South that were supplying the lower South with the slaves, right? Slave rebellions just really weren't as large or as numerous as people feared. But there was definitely slave resistance in other manners. And then the black spirituals, which I gave you the link for to listen to for chapter 12, was something that was, religion is really important in almost every culture in the world, right? And the African American religion was a blend of that. I mean, we have the Salem witch trials, right? And they talk about religion and witchcraft, especially, right? I'm waiting for a nod from the woman who's doing the witchcraft trials paper. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got you've got that, but then you have the blend, and then you have the Christianity, and how whites are using Christianity to help control slaves, but then how slaves are using Christianity to resist slavery. All right, so you see this this difference here between the slaves and how they react. Okay, any other questions, comments? No, we're all good? Okay.
We're all good.
All right, so who wants to do their current event?
Before I came.
Okay, Brianna has hers ready. Brianna, come up here and do yours here, please, so that they can see and hear, because they're not able to see and hear very well. All right, so you sit there. Thank you.
I'll do the media one first.
Okay, can you hear Brianna?
Yes.
And it's talking about guns in Oregon, rules, rights, and regulations. So in the article, the topic being discussed is gun rules and regulations in Oregon. The issue on the use and laws for firearms have become very controversial in the state of Oregon. The question is determining what the proper balance in preventing the availability of guns to criminals, but at the same time allowing responsible gun owners with the rights given to them by the Second Amendment. Dan Thornton, who works at Good Guys Guns in Medford, Oregon, says, "We really like to have people have firearms that know how to use them correctly. Because of tragic events such as the community college shooting, there has been much more questioning and concerns as to who can and can't legally buy and own a gun. On August 9th, the first gun law became present in Oregon. Senate Bill 941 states that a background check is required for every gun sold in the state, not including family members of gun owners or law enforcement. Gun safety advocates say this law is a step in the right direction and still follows the rights given to citizens by the Second Amendment." And then Jennifer Lynch, a member of the Oregon Alliance for Gun Safety, says, "The more we can work together as gun owners and concerned citizens, the more we can reach mutually agreeable solutions on how to best make gun functions in our society."
Okay, did you say a background check now, but not including who?
Family and law enforcement. Like, yeah, their father and family.
So if you are a law enforcement officer, your purchase is not done with a background check. And if you're a family member of...
Like, of the gun owner. So, like, if you're a family member of the gun owner, like, a kid or a what, like, yeah.
Okay, so, like, it wouldn't... Like, if I purchased a gun in Oregon, they wouldn't ask about... They wouldn't look at, like, my uncle?
Yeah.
Okay, would they look at my son or my husband?
Well, like, not... if you're the one buying the gun. No.
Right.
Just
that particular person. Okay. And Senate Bill 941, was that passed?
Yeah, it was. It was made a law.
And it was made a law just recently?
On August 9th, but this article was like less than a week ago.
Oh, okay. All right, questions or comments for Brianna? Okay. Did it say in the article how many other states have background checks?
No. I don't think so.
But it's new to Oregon.
Yeah. And it did not say anything about other states.
And does it say which types of guns they do background checks on? Are they all?
There was one part when it's... No. They did not. Actually, yeah, they did not.
Okay. Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, especially after the shooting in Oregon. And when was that shooting? Was that October?
I think it was, yeah, it was, I'm pretty sure it was at the beginning of October.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, next one.
This one, the title is Obama Plan for Syrian Refugees Scrambled by State Opposition. In the article, the topic of resettlement for Syrian refugees immigrating to the United States is discussed. Before November 13th, the Obama administration had planned to allow 10,000 Syrians into the United States by next year, even though very few refugees had entered the United States in 2011, and I think that number was like 1,500 had entered since 2011. Since the recent attack on Paris, France, however, congressional lawmakers have asked the Obama administration to stall this plan of action. Home, House, and Security Committee Chairman Michael McCall asked President Obama to temporarily suspend the admission of all additional Syrian refugees. Also, as many as 16 state governors, including those in Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Michigan, Mississippi, North Carolina, Ohio, Texas, and Wisconsin are attempting to stall or possibly even resist this new plan of action. In a letter to Obama, Texas Governor Greg Abbott said, "Given the tragic attacks in Paris and threats we've already seen, Texas cannot participate in any program that will result in Syrian refugees, any of whom could be connected to terrorism, being resettled in Texas." Before the attack on Paris, many of the state governors did not have this opinion, but now believe that there would be a great danger in allowing 10,000 Syrian refugees into the United States. But now, after the death of 129 people in the attack of Paris, there is fear that Islamic State militants could target the United States next.
Okay. Questions, comments?
How much do they actually know about the Paris attacks? They've captured all but one of the people involved. Everybody else shot themselves and blew themselves up. There's one still at large. They think he's somewhere over in Belgium. Now Belgium is on tight security lines.
Okay. Did you all hear? Can you all hear?
Sort of.
One of the students, Garrick, said that that's as high as I can turn it up. You might be able to turn yours up on your end. Garrick said that all but one has been caught, and that person, I believe, is in Belgium, and Belgium is on tight lockdown at this time. So if they weren't a suicide bomber and they didn't already kill themselves.
He was native from Belgium. He's Belgian. But he radicalized to
Okay, you have to speak up when you say things. So this is a perfect. I was hoping that somebody would do this particular subject because this chapter is all about immigrants, isn't it? And it's a perfect segue into this chapter because of the ties to the immigrants. So, what other comments do you have? What is Alaska currently doing? You can't see me, can you?
Are we allowing immigrants?
You can see that you already have that.
Yeah, there you go.
Didn't the senator or governor just say that we aren't accepting immigrants from Syria? Well, there's
The governor is deciding right now. There are petitions out. I'll Google that right now. Okay, one day ago it says it's not something he's considered at this time.
I don't think any of them would move up the
Okay,
other
there
way.
are some.
Gold one.
We have many refugees from Africa, and we have there is a high percentage of Muslims in Anchorage, especially. Yes, there is a mega mosque in Anchorage now. But what does this have to do with the history?
Well, I printed this document or this paper. It has all the different history of U.S. immigration laws from 17. Well, it has all of them, but the ones that matter to 1770 or 1875.
Okay. So, what do you see there in this pattern of the time period that we're studying? 1840 to 1846, 48.
The Irish immigrants.
Okay, the Irish immigrants, but let Brianna answer, please.
Well, on this one, it only has 1819 and 1864. So should I just read that?
Okay, what does 1864 say?
Congress first centralized control over immigration under the Secretary of State with the Commissioner. The importation of contract laborers was legalized in this legislation.
Okay, so there was. Oh, you guys didn't get to read chapter 13. All right, was there a lot of immigration? Take a wild guess. Wild stab. A lot of immigration in chapter 13?
Yeah.
Good stab. Okay, millions of people came over during this time frame. Okay, and as you're going to see, these the heavy influx of immigrants changed society. Okay, in what ways do you think it will change society?
Like we're talking about religion and customs.
Religion, customs, okay. In chapter 13, they talk about Germans having their own region or areas of the cities, okay? And you go to any large city today. Taylor, you've been in New York City, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what are some of the ethnic areas in New York City?
Chinatown.
There's Chinatown.
Chinatown, Little Italy.
Yeah.
Is it wrong?
What's that?
Like Harlem.
Harlem is the black area, yeah. So, but you have these strong ties.
There's a Hispanic area somewhere.
Yeah, sure. You have these strong ties to ethnicities within these big cities. Okay, and one of the reasons is because of the immigration, and they would live together. It's easier for many to come in. Okay, is change hard for people? In general, change is hard. So when you come in and you know somebody, will you naturally navigate and migrate to that area where you know someone? Or someone that might know someone that you know, right? You'd be more comfortable probably. Okay, so this is how some of the cities were built up. And as they're bringing refugees over now, they split them up in different regions, and they'll go through different charities, like Lutheran Social Services or Catholic charities will say, we'll sponsor X number of people, and so they'll bring X number of people to Anchorage, or they'll bring them to Milwaukee, or they'll take them to all these different cities or towns throughout the United States. So it's changed a little bit in that manner because you don't have this slew of Irish immigrants in the Northeast. Okay, over 1 million in 10 years. Okay? You don't have this slew of German immigrants coming in. You don't have this slew of Swedish immigrants landing in Wisconsin. Okay? You might have a large group, but it's not going to be 1 million people at a time, which changes religion of the area, right? Or what else might it change?
Would it change the job market? The jobs and what type of jobs are available?
It definitely changed the job market in Chapter 13, didn't it? Well, you will find out that it changes the job market dramatically. It changes the social structure. Okay, so these immigrants, the Irish immigrants that are coming in, where are they on the social ladder?
More towards the beer and brewery ladder.
Beer and brewery ladder, fine. But where would they be on the social ladder? The bottom? Toward the bottom.
Just below Mexicans, but right above the Scottish.
Well, maybe. It depends. And it also depended on what religion they were. When the Irish first started coming over, many of them were Protestant. Okay? Heading into Protestant New England. So then you have 1 million or more coming in, and they are Catholics who've been displaced off of the Protestant land because of blight. And those people are being moved in, and now they're competing. I mean, they were starving in Ireland. So at this point, they're ready to do just about anything to survive, right? So who are they competing against then? Who else is at the bottom of the social ladder?
The Africans.
Exactly, the free blacks. Okay, so you have the Irish and the free blacks. But you're in Northeast. You're in the Northeast. The Northeast is known for what? Blacks, but what about the blacks is it known for?
There's a majority of them that work.
Okay. All right, but what
I'm
do...
trying to answer your question because
Yep.
no one else is.
Right. But what about the whites? How are they reacting? What are they doing about the blacks in the north and in the south?
In the north, they're accepting the freedom.
Accepting of freedom. I'm looking for something else. Well, that was more in the south. They had it in the north too, but the north was seen as the hotbed for what? Remember Concord, and they had lyceums, and they brought people in to talk about this? Abolition. Yes, abolition. Okay, so you've got 1 million Catholics headed in, and bang, they're in Boston. You have free blacks in Boston. Who are you competing against? Right, the Irish are competing against the blacks. So do they like abolitionists? No, because that means that they'll be competing against more blacks for the jobs, right? Right. So, it's a difficult time for immigrants, isn't it? It's difficult to be an immigrant, isn't it? And they didn't have as many political immigrants. All right? So, if we're going to bring in, what did Obama say, Brianna? How many was he bringing in?
10,000.
10,000. So if we bring in 10,000, okay, not nearly 1 million, but 10,000. How many people immigrated from Syria into Germany just recently? Anybody know? 100 or 200,000. How many are missing?
36 to 40,000 with this one.
Okay, 36 to 40,000 are missing. So this is one reason that some of the governors are saying we don't want any Syrian refugees because they're linking, or the conjecture is that they're linking the Paris attacks to some of the missing German Syrian refugees.
Well, they traced one of the attackers to the Greece refugee.
Okay? So this is why there are some concerns within the United States at this time. Were there concerns in the United States with the immigration in the 1840s? There were definitely concerns. Definite concerns. Are they valid concerns? Okay, I hear a few yes, absolutely. How about you, Amanda? What do you think?
Yeah, especially since jobs are so important.
Okay, especially since jobs are so important. How about you, Valdez?
Because I've been answering this whole time. Someone else has to answer. Come on, throw yourself the bone over here. Seriously?
What do you think, Taylor?
Can you repeat the question?
Do you think it's important that we were discussing, or that there were some valid concerns, perhaps, on the immigration during the 1840s?
Yeah, because it's part of like new change for religion and jobs, and overall just a big change for not just immigrants but the like natives and people that are living there, and people coming in and taking their jobs and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. And when it comes down to survival, I mean, you can look at what people actually need to survive, right? You need safety, you need food, and most people think that they need someplace to live. All right? And these are all difficult things to find as an immigrant. So we will talk a little bit more about that. Thank you, Brianna. That was a great segue into chapter 13. Perfect, really. Segue into chapter 13.
Right? Mine is like,
Do you have yours done?
yeah, mine's exactly the same as hers. I don't really have to do it. I mean,
Well, it's exactly the same.
well,
Did you do both?
yeah.
Okay, so you did Senate Bill 241?
Oh, no.
All right, well then come up here and do the one that isn't exactly the same, please. Did that ever print? Okay.
It says it's ready and it says. Okay.
I'll have to put my tech hat on here in a little bit.
Let's see.
Okay.
Go.
Go ahead, Garrett.
All right. France has mobilized 115,000 security personnel in the wake of Paris attacks. The French Prime Minister has said 128 raids have come in their own country, 128 raids on French citizens who were suspected militants. French airstrikes also hit Islamic State in Syria overnight. A huge manhunt is underway for the one suspect, Salah Abdeslam, and he is believed to have fled across the border to his native Belgium. Belgian police have released more pictures of the wanted man. Belgium's government has raised its terror threat level because of the failure so far to arrest him. The Interior Minister added that 128 raids on suspected Islamist militants have been carried out overnight, Monday to Tuesday, and 160 raids were made earlier on Monday, with 23 people arrested and dozens of weapons seized. French media reported that during the raids, police found a safe house used by the attackers in Bogny, a suburb of Paris. Why did people? Okay. Now I know how it feels to read our name. Abdeslam.
something like that. Brother was thought to have rented the apartment that was used for planning the attacks. France has invoked the previous unused treaty or clause in the Treaty of the European Union on obliging all other member states to provide it with aid and assistance by all means in their power. Within minutes, EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini said that all 28 states had agreed. Today, France asked the European Union for aid and assistance in the whole European. Today, the whole of Europe replied in unison, yes. Mr. Holland is due to fly to Washington and Moscow next week for talks with U.S. and Russian leaders on what to do with the Syrian rebels. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, French warplanes carried out fresh strikes against the ISIS stronghold of Raqqa in northern Syria. The Army General Staff said, destroying a command center and training center for rebels. President Holland took a oh my God, I can't read. Freaking dyslexic or something. Oh my gosh. President Holland took a rare joint session of the French Parliament on Monday that he would table a bill to extend for 3 months the state of emergency declared after the attacks. Parliament will vote on the measure Wednesday. And then, that's the same as legislative. So do I have to read it again?
No, we're not done with this one yet. So, are you done reading?
Yeah, I'm done reading.
Okay, so questions or comments for Garrett? Okay, does everybody understand what's going on? For the most part?
Oh, by the way, ISIS has just threatened Washington, D.C. that they will burn Washington, D.C. That it will fall to them.
Wouldn't be the first time.
And they just threatened Russia, saying that we will take back all our land and rape your women and children and kill all the men.
That's a pretty tall.
That's a tall threat. That's
threat.
like
That's a rather
That's a
large.
bark.
It is a large bark, but Paris was. How many people died in Paris?
140 and 400 wounded.
Okay.
And
Less than 500.
no, it's over 500.
Well, 400 were wounded.
Yeah.
Right. So this gets into several different issues in history. So how are you linking this to history, Garrett?
Well, our history, to American history?
Yes, to what we've been studying. How do you link this to American history?
Oh, the pirates in North Africa bribed the United States.
Yes, they did. The Barbary pirates. And what did Thomas Jefferson do?
He paid the bribe at first and then sent warships to destroy them.
Right. He refused to do it because he knew it would never end. Okay, if he gave into it. So did it say? So it said 128 raids in France on French citizens.
Yep.
And they arrested 23 people?
Yep, they arrested 23 suspected militants.
And they found a safe house.
They found the safe house they used to plot the Paris attacks, they believe.
Okay.
And dozens of weapons captured.
So were these people already on a watch list?
They put them on they were mostly on a watch list. But also now they're blaming Microsoft or one of the big computer companies for not knowing about this because they found messages earlier that there was going to be attacks on Paris, but they did not believe that they would attack Paris and did not alert the French.
So,
They knew about it a week before, he said. It was Microsoft or Samsung. It went through one of their phones. They were sending text messages and emails, and the filters caught it, but they just didn't believe it. So they thought it was something else, so they just bypassed it.
okay.
And then they
So like
tagged.
9/11?
Yeah.
And like Pearl Harbor?
Yep.
Okay. Interesting. But you're saying...
At the time of Pearl Harbor?
No, I'm saying that they were aware that there was going to be an attack. They just weren't quite sure where, but they also didn't believe
Japanese had
that
any,
it was going to happen there.
they didn't think they were capable enough of pulling off an attack.
Right. Okay. So now, but they're blaming a private company, not the equivalent of the NSA.
Yep, pretty much. Private company. Actually, let me Google that.
Okay. Well, not right now. So you're unsure, but you believe that it's a private company.
It was a private company. I recognize the name.
Okay. And then
But
here's another.
regardless, they knew about it before it was going to happen. They just ignored it again.
So there was chatter.
There was chat.
Wait, if they're blaming a private company, you know that the State Departments of these various countries also knew, because you know,
Private company.
if you know anything about Snowden, you would know that
They're also blaming him again.
they're blaming Snowden
They're
in Russia.
not blaming him, but they're saying because of his leaks, now it makes it harder for the CIA and the FBI to conduct searches on
So-
people in the United States
So okay,
because of the recent bills that they passed where NSA can't
okay,
physically watch you through your computer.
okay. All right. So another thing that I want to point out is that they invoked the clause with the European Union that every country in the European Union would support them, aid and assist them. But what are they asking for in aiding and assisting?
I don't know. It didn't say.
It didn't say. Okay.
It didn't say. All it said they were asking for aid and assistance. I'm not sure.
Okay. So, as we get further into history and you see the when you see people or countries declaring war on one another, you'll see that others fall in line with them. And that is because of why would they do that?
Voluntary association.
De Tocqueville's Voluntary Association.
Holy
Well,
crap, I was
I
right.
don't know if I go that far. But how about a treaty? How about the treaties and alliances that these nations have? Okay? And treaties and alliances are extremely important in diplomatic arenas. Correct? All right. All right, thank you very much, Garrick. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Did you already do the write-up on your other report?
Yeah, it's right here.
Okay. Even though it's the same as Brianna's, I'd like you to read it so that you can be finished with your current events.
Okay. Republicans are putting President Barack Obama and his party over the defensive over accepting Syrian refugees, following reports that one of the terrorists involved in the Paris attacks entered Europe as part of the wave of Syrians fleeing the civil war. GOP governor and lawmakers were quick to announce they wouldn't allow Syrian refugees into their states and are appealing for stronger control of U.S. borders. The issue opens up a firm political line of attack for Republican presidential candidates who had been struggling to find their footing on national security challenges posed by the Paris slaughter. The rhetoric on the right clearly angered Obama, who was who argued at a press conference Monday that the United States must remain committed to its values of tolerance and accepting immigrants. The people who are fleeing Syria are the most harmed by terrorism, Obama said in Turkey at a meeting of the G20. It is very important that we do not close our hearts to these victims of such violence and somehow start equating the issue of refugees with the issue of terrorism. Republicans, however, are stressing the security concerns posed by the potential influx of people from the war-torn country. They have called on congressional leaders to block the Obama administration from proceeding with plans to resettle thousands of refugees, with some asking House Speaker Paul Ryan to lead the effort. In a letter to Ryan, Ben Carson, the retired neurosurgeon and a Republican frontrunner, called for Congress to block funding for any programs that seek to resettle refugees and or migrants from Syria into the United States effective immediately. Until we can sort out the bad guys, we must not be foolish, Carson said in a news conference in Nevada. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee similarly heaped pressure on Ryan, saying in a statement, Speaker Ryan needs to make it clear that if the president won't stand to protect America from wholesale open borders, then Republicans will. If Ryan will not lead and reject the importation of those fleeing the Middle East without assurances that we can separate refugees from terrorists, then Speaker Ryan needs to step down and let somebody else lead, Huckabee said. In addition, Governors John Cash and Bobby Jindal of Ohio and Louisiana, respectively, said they would work to keep refugees out of their states. And Senator Rand Paul, another 2016 contender, introduced legislation that would block the United States from issuing visas to refugees from countries with a high risk of terrorism in an effort to stop terrorists from walking in our front door. That was CNN.
Okay. All right, so questions or comments for Garrett? All right, so Obama's talking about remaining tolerant of immigrants. Is that?
Yep, remaining tolerant and have our hearts open to accept them.
Okay. All right, so in chapter 13, what happens in 1830?
I haven't got that far yet.
Okay. Mexico. Excuse me. Mexico closes Texas to further American immigration. All right. There have been times in U.S. history where the immigration has gotten to a point where there was almost no immigration, especially from certain countries. And most of that came from the East. So they limited the Chinese. They banned the Chinese. The Japanese. They also limited strongly the number of Eastern Europeans, okay, at certain times. There are a lot of limitations during immigration, and so, but those have swung back and forth throughout history, and so that's why it's great to see this as an example of a tolerance toward immigration. Okay. Any other questions or comments? How are you tying this to history? Is that what I just said?
The way I see it, all powers that are not implied in the Constitution are given to the states, and it should be the states' right whether or not to accept the people, because it doesn't specifically say in the Constitution that the federal government has the power to impose refugees of any country on any state without their consent. It doesn't anywhere say anything about refugees.
Okay.
This would be unimplied powers given to the states.
Very nice, Garrett. Very nice. How about some of the laws, though? There are a lot of laws about immigration. Brianna printed some of them out. Okay? And so there are certain laws that states must comply with.
Exactly.
All right? But those are, that's a great thought in that. I'm just looking for those laws. Oh, there they are. Okay. To provide for 1888. To provide for expulsion of aliens.
So expulsion means to get rid of, right?
That is correct.
Well,
And that was mainly for Chinese at that time.
where
okay.
California.
First
where-
permanent immigration quota law in 1924 established a preference quota system, non-quota status and consular control system, okay, and a border control. So, does every country have immigration laws?
Yep.
Yes. Do they vary widely?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yes, they do. If you are in Iraq by accident, what happens to you?
You live in fear?
Okay. There were 3 people who were held for, 2-3 years, and I think some of them are still being held. They were hiking in Iraq. So, yes, people deal with immigration very differently in different states. So, it will be interesting to see how this all plays out, especially if some of the other threats come to fruition.
Well,
All right.
they did it in Paris. So
They
what's
certainly
different with Russia and here?
They certainly did do it in Paris. Well, we're not sure. We'll see. We'll see how it plays out. Thank you very much, Garrick and Brianna. Those were great and great segue into chapter 13.
Actually, I have one last question.
Yes,
You mind, both of you guys, I think both of you mentioned Russia.
you need to speak up.
How is Russia tied in?
With Syria?
Yeah, and the United States and France was going to talk to America and Russia.
Okay. Does anybody know how Russia is tied in at this time?
Russia's declared war on the Islamic State and is backing Assad, trying to keep Assad in power. That way it doesn't fall into chaos.
Assad is in Syria.
He's,
Okay.
He's the ruler of Syria.
And the United States is not supportive of Assad.
They're backing not the Islamic State but the rebels, trying to overthrow Assad. And the Russians are backing Assad, trying to keep Assad in power so it doesn't look like Afghanistan. That's what they're
Very complex. It's very
There are 2
complex.
superpowers that can help. That's all you gotta say.
Exactly.
That can help, may not help, or will help.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. So moving on, chapter 13. Morgan, please bring your stuff on Thursday.
I will.
Okay, because
We got like 3 people on Thursday now.
yes, we just keep getting backed up further and further. All right, so expectations and realities of newcomers and natives. All right, you have the Texicans. Oh my word.
Wow.
Yeah, that
We
was.
got Texas Mexicans over here.
There you go. The
They
Tejano.
must know how to win a gun battle.
The Tejano, the Texican. Oh my word, Texans. Excuse me, of Mexican descent. Oh, I apologize for that. Oh my word.
I think you forgot about the Alamo.
As long as you were down in Texas, they wouldn't like that.
I'm sure they wouldn't appreciate that. Luckily, I butcher all names of various countries, right? All right. So from 1836 to 1845, more and more Anglos, more and more Americans were coming in, and it led to more prejudice in Texas, which was part of Mexico. Okay, so during this time, though, we also expanded the area within the United States. We expanded it by 50% within 1,000 days. So that's a significant difference. And you have the Democratic Party that's very important during this time, because the Democratic Party is working with immigrants, and immigrants are aligning themselves with that particular party, right? So what does that create in the power structure? Does that affect the power structure?
Creates tension.
Creates tension? Okay. One of my former students said that tension was like one of my favorite words. And in some ways it can be, because it does create a lot of tension. But it definitely affects the power structure if you have an influx of that many new voters who are all excited about voting and are voting for one party, right? Okay, so expectations. This was the largest immigration time period in history in the United States. So 5 million people came in between 1815 and 1860. So you get 5 million people, okay, but you've expanded the territory. All right, so you've expanded the territory so they can kind of diffuse. But do they all diffuse? No, they don't. So many of them landed where, Amanda? Do you know? Or take a wild guess. If they didn't all diffuse, where'd they land?
In the city?
Yes. Good guess. Good guess. Nice educated guess. So you had this tremendous number of new immigrants in the cities who were competing for, yes, the clock is incorrect. This clock is better. Who were competing for jobs. They needed a place to live. They needed to build places for these people to live. So the Irish were some of the workers who built a lot of these cities, along with the canals of the time, and along with most of the really heavy labor. The Irish were dramatically influential and integral to the development of this time. Okay? Now, some came for religious freedom, but most came for better economic realities. Okay? Right now, the Syrians are coming over. Why? Political refugees. Okay? And a lot of that has to do with
Civil War.
Civil War, religion, right? Also? Right? Would you say so, Brianna? And is it which religion? Do you know? The Sunni and the Shiite.
Right.
Muslim.
Right.
Okay. So at this time, you're having a conflict between the Catholic and the Protestant. Is this new to American history? No, we've seen this conflict dramatically play itself out before, haven't we? All right, so people were excited to be coming over. The Germans could buy a really large farm for the amount that they could spend to rent a farm in Germany. Okay, and Britons were told that, hey, you know what? There are so many peaches in the orchards that they go bad because nobody eats them. Okay, there's just an overabundance. And when they got here, the reality was not quite the same. All right, because many of them weren't able to get out of the cities. Many of them didn't want to get out of the cities. Many of them didn't have the resources to get out of the cities. Okay, so there were a lot of different realities for these immigrants as they came in. It was, in general, very, very different than what they were thinking. A lot of them thought, hey, you know, this could be a utopia. This is like the perfect place for us to go. We're going to thrive. Our families are going to thrive. And in some ways, like if you were Irish and you were going through the blight, the potato blight, you survived. Which, hey, you're thriving because you're still alive, right? I mean, 1 million people perished in the blight in Ireland. All right. So if you made it over to America, you had at least a decent chance of surviving. You might not have had a good life, but at least you didn't die. Okay? And your children didn't die. Right? And so if you look at it, and throughout history, many people have the same issues. The Syrians who are refugees now, most of them who are coming over want just simply to live an existence where they're not attacked and where they can raise their family and their children have a better life than they had. Right? I mean, that's pretty universal throughout the world. Okay? And so, as the immigrants are coming over and they're landing in these different areas, we talked about how the Swedish and the Norwegians were landing in like Wisconsin, Minnesota, that region. A lot of Germans landed and went up the Mississippi River into Illinois, into Missouri, Ohio, Iowa, different areas. And however, the cities still drew the most number of immigrants. Okay? And there were a lot of immigrants who simply wanted to live in the cities. And this is where you see the shift, like in the Lowell factories, in the manufacturing factories, where they're moving from working until you get married until working until you die. Right? Especially the Irish women who were oftentimes single, or they were oftentimes they would get married really late in life. Okay? And the Germans were an interesting sort because when they came over, there was no Germany as we know it today. It was regions. Okay? You had Bavaria, which Emmanuel, that's, Oktoberfest, Bavaria. You have Westphalia up north you have the Rhone, you have these different regions that are coming. The Ruhr region, which is a region centered around one of the rivers. Okay? What's that? And Rhineland, exactly. And those are still being used today in the European Union. Okay? The European Union actually recognizes those individual states, really, and they support a lot of infrastructure and they support a lot of projects within those individual actual states, okay, within Germany. Not necessarily all of Germany, but Bavaria or these different states. So when they came over, they were used to being in a very tight-knit village. They were used to being living very close by. And so some of the American farms where they were very isolated, like we've studied, didn't even appeal to them. Okay? They had no desire to live like that. All right? Because it was something completely foreign to them. All right? Not everyone, but many. And you also get the conflict there between the Catholics and Protestants. Okay? But the immigrants from Germany transcended all of those. So you had Catholics coming over, you had Protestants in, you had Jews, you had, and some various other religions, but they did, as de Tocqueville said, form a lot of voluntary associations. They were known as being very insular, okay? So they would stick together, all right? But that's not uncommon at this time. If you go to some of these really old towns, and not even at this time, like towns that were built, early 1900s, you go into some of these old coal mining towns. You have your Italian section, they have their Italian church. They have the Polish section, they have their Polish church, and that's where they all lived, okay? They have just these little enclaves, even within these small cities, right? And so their separateness, that division that people saw, some people who were native born saw that as threatening and didn't appreciate that. Okay? Some of the other immigrants also didn't appreciate it. And then you talk more about the Irish, and between 1815 and the 1820s, most of them were Protestant. A lot of them were merchants, small landowners. But then after the 1820s, or like during the 1820s, when the Blight started hitting in Ireland, you had more and more Catholics who were being pushed off of the Protestant land in Ireland. Okay? Between 1845 and 1855, there were 1.8 million immigrants only from Ireland. Okay? Between 1815 and 1844, there were 1 million. So you almost doubled it within a decade. All right? So, huge influx of people, which almost always creates tension. Okay? Because you have infrastructure. I mean, you're changing things so rapidly that your infrastructure, your social structure can't keep up. All right? Or maybe it can in some ways, but it's very, very hard. It's very taxing on all of that. All right? And so, as they're working and worried about competing against slaves, they were seen as as really despising the abolitionists. Okay, nativism is, boy, I wish you guys had read the chapter 13. Nativism is a really important concept to understand in these chapters, because you're going to see this again and again, okay? Where you have native born who believe that things should stay relatively the same. They don't want this huge influx of other ideas and people and cultures that don't assimilate or don't add to the society that's already present. Okay? And so when you get this nativism, you see a lot of anti-Catholicism, which is also tied to the Protestant roots, especially in New England, where they were getting slammed with the most Irish. Okay? And, I mean, there were Kensington riots. There were riots. Kensington riots were in Philadelphia. All right? Where there was this, there were alleged conspiracies where the Catholics were going to take over all of society. Right? And so, there was this, this domination and this power structure that native-borns wanted to preserve. All right? And so, this counterattack by the Protestants, they created the American Republican Party, they created the United Order of Americans, the Order of the Star-Spangled Banner, which actually grew into a major political party, all right, which was the Know Nothing Party, a major political force in 1850. So you have, from nativism and from this anti-Catholicism, you have this surge that must have a broad base to create a political party that actually is viable. It must be pretty large, right? You would think? Yeah? Okay. And so there were a lot of local riots, there were attacks, and it just was feeding on this discontent. And, you know, there was a lot of angst. When you get such change so quickly, there's often angst. There are a lot of different things that are going on. So land reform was one way that they thought would be able to address these issues, where they would open more land up and people would move out. But again, a lot of people didn't want to move out, right? You had labor unions who were starting and who were trying to better the conditions, because in all honesty, the conditions at this time pretty much sucked. You were working 14, 15-hour days, your kids were working. It was not easy. It was not an easy life, right? And so the people were joining because they thought they could gain more by joining a union than they could by going out and farming. And the Commonwealth versus Hunt was fought in the Supreme Court. It started in Massachusetts, and it was very significant because it came out and ruled that unions were not illegal monopolies that restricted trade. Okay? Now, at this time, very few people belonged to the unions. It was just starting to get going. But when you hit, as we progress through history, and you watch the progression here within the Labor Party, and that this particular ruling is extremely important in the progression of labor and labor relations. Okay? So these tensions also were part of the political system. I mean, it's working itself into the political system. So it's really affecting almost everything, because you have the immigrant politics where, you have these politically active, mainly Democrats. And so you have this just big influx in the Democratic Party, which means that they win elections, right? Which change some of the outcomes of different policies, foreign and domestic, right? And so what was happening is they were bringing these people in, and then they were redirecting these local politics to national politics and policies in the nation. All right? So it was extremely important, these immigrant politics. All right, so then you have the trails out west. You have the Oregon Trail. In 1840, you've got the Appalachians to the Mississippi River, right? That was considered the West. And then you have the far West. The first waves were starting to go out to the far West here in 1840. You have the Santa Fe Trail. You have what then was creating Donner Pass. But the Great Plains were pretty inhospitable. All right, and the Rocky Mountains were inhospitable. Has anyone been to Lake Tahoe? Donner Pass? Yeah? Going through Alaskan mountains and going through California mountains, up through the Sierra Nevadas, it's pretty different, but they think of, they were getting 12 feet of snow up in Donner Pass. You can't travel in a wagon over Donner Pass in the winter. Okay, just not happening. This is how the Donner Party got caught in the winter because they got lost, really, because the trails and the maps were not accurate, of course, and they were not very good. All right, but regardless of that, people were overcoming these perceptions of the far west as being totally inhospitable, and they were headed out there. They wanted to try new things, go new places. They wanted to head out into the far west. Okay, we're going to get cut off here in a few minutes. I want to know who's going to be ready for current events on Thursday. Morgan and Manuel. Okay, so you'll be gone. All right. Anyone else?
It says there was one more name for the current event on Thursday other than mine.
Yes. Okay. So we'll I'll contact that. Please, please, please remember your current events on Thursday. All right. Any questions?
Are we continuing chapter 13 on Thursday?
Yes, we are, and we'll likely start chapter 14.
When do grades for
Alright.
I'm sorry?
When do grades for exam and go up?
I'm almost done grading all of your exams. I'm sorry, but I was busier than I thought at the conference last week. But I will get them out and done for you.
Did you ever grade Sarah's story, that worksheet we did, the video worksheet?
I did.
Because it's not on Blackboard. Yeah.
Well, that was brilliant, wasn't it?
Also the Constitution.
Okay. Luckily, it's only like...
Did you get both sides of my Constitution Day thing yet?
Yes, I did. And I have that. It's in the...
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. So if you have anything else, remember to turn into Tocqueville on voluntary associations if you haven't already.
I'm gonna be gone on Thursday.
And you're gone, okay.
I think Ivy is going
And Ivy will be as well. All right. Then I will see you all on Thursday. Have a great day.
Alright.
Thank you.
Yep.